Theater of Energy Activism, interview with David Schwartz, episode 74. David Schwartz is a theater director, lecturer, and activist. He holds a PhD, wrote and produced plays focused on the impact of energy prices and the shuttering of coal mines in Romania. Welcome to the My Energy 2050 podcast, where we speak to the people building a clean energy system by 2050. I'm your host, Michael LaBelle. This week, we have a special guest, at least from my perspective, with David Schwartz, because here we examine the theater in relation to the energy sector. So how does the theater fit within the energy transition? As policymakers are discovering, society does matter. And unfortunately, this is more true in some countries than others. David's focus on Romania deals with the economic transition that the people have experienced. His productions highlight the plight of people unable to afford the bare essentials to exist in a modern society. And then really the transition from communism to capitalism has really brought out this disparity between the different types of systems and the impact on people. From my experience, when I think about the policy making and promises that come from national politicians, and even at the EU level, I often think about what is the real impact on the ground for people on the economic margins. David has created plays reflecting these personal and local struggles. On one hand, David comes across as a radical instigator of performative art. But as you'll hear in part of our conversation, he takes the real experiences of people and presents it through theatrical performances. And what is more true than the real experiences of people or even fictional representations drawn from real experiences? I think as an academic, I often get caught up in policy or technology aspects of the energy transition, and I don't see those that suffer in energy poverty. When we hear about big policies and money to assist vulnerable groups like that in the EU's social climate fund, it's planned to be 87 billion euros and there's all these big plans for it. Well, I have my serious doubts about how this money will be distributed. From my conversation with David, you'll also get an impression he likewise holds limited faith in governments and how it properly assists citizens. I think the theater plays an important role in bringing out the need for greater assistance and a focus on, I would say, humanity and the role that the energy system plays in people's lives. When I say you'll hear part of our conversation, I have to admit I had a bit of a technical difficulty with part of the interview, so I didn't get essentially the middle part of our conversation. So I apologize both to David and you for this failure. But I can certainly attest to David's in-depth knowledge and research skills at collecting and understanding how people experience and suffer from energy bills. That the fact that he brings this to the stage demonstrates his skills in capturing social phenomena that we often only read about and is hard to experience. So my profound respects goes out to David and those working with him to raise this issue in a more engaging format that is usually emotionally detached from reality. And before we begin, I want to thank Roxana Bucata for putting me in touch with David and all her work in organizing the other interviews I've done in Romania, or I did in Romania in November 2022. A final note, this interview was done for my 2022 role as an Open Society University Network Senior Fellow at Chatham House, the Royal Institute of International Affairs. Funding was generously provided to produce the podcast for the episodes recorded in 2020 and 2022. So I still have a few more in my back pocket, and I'm releasing those now. And now for this week's episode. I'm here today with David Schwartz, a theater director here in Bucharest. And David, we'll just get right into it. We've had a great conversation walking around, working to find the cafe. My first question to you is, I don't know how to say this because usually I interview people working in academia and policy, but what you do and what you write about in the arts area I think is really relevant for the podcast, and this is why I wanted to talk to you today. So how did you begin in the field of arts? Maybe I'll frame it like that.
I have studied theater directing at the university here in Bucharest, and it all started, I guess, because both me and some colleagues of mine were really unhappy with the theater we were seeing in the city or in Romania. So this was more than 15 years ago, and we felt and we thought that the theater that was made back then was really so much art for art's sake, and was really not really connected with the contemporary realities and with the social and political aspects of the society we live in. And I guess from this feeling of unhappiness and even of revolt, I would say, towards these huge amounts of money that were spent, of state money that were spent on theater, which was not really relevant, or it was not really relevant in our opinion for many categories of people. Started the idea to do it differently, to do a different kind of theater, to do a different kind of art, an art that is more politically engaged, an art that is that aims to discuss the structure of the society, the causes of the problems or the struggles in the society, that aims to represent perspectives that are, let's say, that oppose the mainstream perspective, and so that's how we actually started. We started quite radical for that time for Romania, by going in a neighborhood, in just this rather working class neighborhood in Bucharest, to do theater in the street there with the people there, so really get as far away as possible from the institutionalized bourgeois center mainstream theater.
So wait, so like you just set up the theater in the street?
That was the beginning. We just we set out. We came with a bunch of young actors and actresses, and with a very simple props and setup, and we did theater in the park or in a square. So I guess that was and we did it. It was quite socially engaged as well. It was about evictions that were taking place in the neighborhood, and we involved the people in the neighborhood, people who were going to be evicted, to be part of the performance, and we had debates as well and protests as well. So it was quite an activist theater that we have proposed. Of course, now after 15 years, this has become quite mainstream in Romania as well. So it's not something that only I am doing or only me and a couple of other people are doing. Now it's almost 15 years later. It's even in the mainstream, at the National Theatre, it's quite normal to see a political attitude in a performance. But it was quite different. It was quite different when we have started. So yeah, that's the beginning. So
no, I'm amazed by that you're able, and now even this political theater is going on. I'll just mention in Hungary because it's not allowed anymore. But that's not the topic of our podcast. But the focus though for the podcast is on energy, and so then how did you come to understand that energy? And I just say energy, right? And I know we can talk about coal and we can talk about households, but maybe how did you come to see energy as an important political, economic subject that you can bring to the theater?
Well, I guess it developed. I mean, it was not something that I had in mind from the beginning. It just went from one topic to another. For example, if we talk about coal, you may know that we did a performance about the situation of the coal mines and the coal mines area in Jiu Valley in Romania, and we did this 10 years ago. So at the beginning, at that time, I haven't started from the idea that energy is something really meaningful from the development of society, but sort of the other way around, looking at the people and how do the changes in the energy system affect the lives of the people and the lives of a whole community. So that was our first our performance that we did in 2012 was called Underground. It was about the lives and experiences of people who live in these mining areas that have been basically abandoned by the state. So that was let's say the first project that I have worked on that involved a relation to energy, but it was not directly about energy, but rather about the consequences. But then and now maybe coming 10 years later, coming to the present day, the idea to do a performance about energy, and which is also the performance that we have done. It's called Energie Vitală, Vital Energy. It's not. I want to state that it's not about energy, but it's rather about the crisis of the energy prices.
Okay, excellent.
So that's what actually interested me, because. Actually from 2 years ago I started to see and to read and to see that there is this huge growing in the energy prices that's going on all over Europe, but in Romania more than in other countries. And I was actually, it came from a very personal curiosity. I was very eager to understand what the hell is going on.
Okay.
Well,
did you feel it yourself in your own bills, or how did you?
Well, of course, we felt it in our own bills, but it was not only that it affected me, but rather the news that came. For example, in Romania we had several cases of people who killed themselves because they couldn't afford to pay the bill. Wow. It was actually, we had 2 cases of people who wrote their goodbye message on the bill.
Really?
Yes. So it was really. So, and those news were quite shocking. And then we had this other situation in the last winter when some schools closed and they kept doing online education because they couldn't afford to pay the bills.
Yes.
And then there was a situation with a hospital that couldn't afford to pay. And now it's of course generalizing this situation. Probably this winter there will be many schools that will not be able to do that will need to go to online.
No, and in Hungary as well. Absolutely, it's the same way. Yes,
it's probably in many countries in Europe is the same situation. And in Germany, for example, they even talk about stopping the theaters in winter at all. So probably they will not have performances during the winter, because, as you may know, that theaters are big consumers of energy because of the lighting systems.
Yes. But can we stop there for a sec? Can I just say, maybe to back up a bit, like the closing of schools, the closing of theaters in the wintertime. So my question to you, I have my own ideas on this, but why is that so bad? Especially like the theater. We can live without the theater, can't we?
We can live without anything.
Okay. Yes.
It depends how we see culture as a vital part of our society, or we do not. I do believe that there is public goods, and there are public goods, and I do believe that there are some basic necessities which are important for the physical and mental and the spiritual development of a human being. I am a theater artist. I believe that theater is one of those. Of course, many people can debate this, but we have seen this. We had almost 2 years without theater already, only with the online theater because of the pandemic crisis, and I would say that the consequences were not that good. I would say that theater is of all arts, is probably the only art which is totally dependable of a meeting face to face, and of actually being in the same space between the artists and the audience, and among the audience, the people themselves. And I would say that in this time of going more and more online and more isolated as well, it becomes even more crucial than it was 20 or 50 years ago.
Yes.
But of course, it's my subjective perspective.
No.
of a theater artist.
I'll just point to our meeting here, right? I was able to come here to Bucharest physically and meet with you. I mean, yeah, during COVID, we would do an online interview or something, but now I appreciate and I feel like I'm getting so much more out of meeting with people physically and just by being together physically rather than doing things online.
That's right.
It's a completely different experience.
It's a very big part of the communication between people is not what we say, but it's the language and it's the gestures and the emotions and these things. Some of them can be perceived online, some of them obviously cannot. So I'm sure that we lose a lot by not meeting live or in person. And so coming back to why is theater important?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
this is my answer. You know.
Okay, and so could you maybe give us a bit of a background about the first performance? It was underground, I believe, and then the second, the Energy Vitala. About what were the storylines, or what were they about?
The first, the underground. So it was based on interviews. So it's basically a structure of monologues and that were verbatim, actually, so word by word, based on the interviews with several people in the Jiu Valley area, and we try to do a sort of anthropological theater work in which to see if through these testimonies we can get a broader perspective of how does the society look like, how does the situation look like in a city where all the mines are closing, in a city, in a town, or several towns, sorry, no city, in several towns that were dependent on the mining activity, and in which the state didn't have a plan B.
Yeah, there was no
There was
plan
no
B.
plan
There
B.
was nothing. Yeah.
There was nothing.
Yeah.
So basically what happened was that the mines were closing and the people had no way to find new jobs. So it was basically a destructuring of the community and of the respective society. And we tried to see how do people struggle with it, how do they see it, is it how do they perceive the mining activity, what were the strong points and what were the really bad points of the mining
Yes,
activity.
and this was in the 1990s, wasn't it?
Yes, this happened between 1997 and the 2000s.
Okay.
So because what happened, it was that in 1996 the regime changed, became a rather more right-wing, more liberal, more Western Europe-oriented political regime, and they engaged to close the mines.
Okay, yes.
In 1997 there was this first big how is it called in English? This big
like privatization, or
it was not a privatization, but they fired a lot of people.
Okay,
and so they gave these acts, these political acts, through which they fired basically around 50 to 80% of the miners between 1997 and 2010, I think.
Okay.
So when we did the research there in 2011, most of the mines were closed or were closing, and the ones that were functioning at very low capacity.
Okay.
And we were interested to see how do the people take this, what's going on, and how does this affect the families, because there were very bad situations or very complicated. For example, in many of the workers, as it happened in the West, I think, when they closed the mines, many were not able to really adapt. Many went to big depressions that were treated with alcohol, and this there came bigger problems. The women started to sort of take control of the families, which was a very interesting and good part. But most of them went to work abroad because they couldn't find work in Romania. And then, of course, the family split, and you have new problems coming from there. Many of the workers went back. Many of the workers were actually they came from the countryside. They came from the villages to work in the mines. So then they went back to their village. But in their village, the relatives told them, what are you doing here? You have no land. We cannot give you the land.
Oh, I see.
That was the deal. So there were big problems fighting around the land between the peasants that stay there and the miners who are going back to agriculture or trying to go back to agriculture. So you had all this very, very complicated and I think very interesting, but in the same time really terrible social conflicts following the closing of the mines. So that is what the show was about.
Okay, and so you you conducted interviews and then made them into monologues for actors to perform. And then what was the reaction or the I don't want to say acceptance, but what did people think of the play at the time?
Well, now it had quite a big success. Even by now, we still perform it.
Oh, really?
We still perform it. Yes, 10 years after. We actually on Sunday we had a performance with a full house. So
excellent!
People are still eager to see it. So for the people in Bucharest, it was something obviously different. It was quite a shock. It's also that. There is this thing that we should talk about to understand the whole context. In 1990 in Bucharest, there were these huge student riots, and the state called the miners in to make order. Let's say. And there were huge fightings between students and miners in 1990 in Bucharest. So the image of the miners here in Bucharest was very much connected, maybe still is, but 10 years ago even more. It was very much connected with this image of the brute of this miner who has no brain and is beating up the emancipated students. And these miners as reminiscences of communism and of the old regime and so on and so forth. Of course, there is a huge lie around this because not even 10% of the miners came to Bucharest. Obviously, and of the ones that came, not all of them beat people up and so on, obviously. But the image is like this, and it was very much perpetrated by the right-wing intellectual elite. In Romania. So you have these very important intellectual figures who talk about the miner as a brute or the miners as barbarians and so on and so forth. There is even there is a film by this very appreciated Romanian film director Lucian Pintilie. It's from 1994, which pictures the miners as this brutes and crazy and murderers and so on. So the image was this.
But it was the example of the regime at the time setting one part of society against another part of society.
It was this huge diversion by the political regime at the time, but it's very complicated. I will not get into it because there were different factions in the regime that were fighting among each other. It's very complicated.
But bringing that to Bucharest then,
bringing
to perform
it to Bucharest, the performance. So many people were, for many people, I guess it was a revelation. Okay, so this is what happened after. So these are the consequences. Okay, so these people are people as well. They have their own lives, they have their own children, their own parents, their own families, their own struggles. So I would say it was quite strong. But maybe even more interesting or as interesting was when we performed the shows in Jiu Valley area. So when we did it for the audiences that were part of our research, let's say, and it was it was quite amazing that we had the people whose stories were transmitted in the show, who came to see the performance, and they were really intervening during the performance.
Oh, really?
At some point, they were arguing with the actors. At some point, they were singing songs together with the actors, because there are also songs in the performance.
Okay.
So it was quite an enriching and amazing experience for us as theater artists.
Yes.
And we felt that the people sort of felt that we did justice. And so they were quite. I mean, we haven't found even one person who would say that he was not pleased with what he saw. So people recognized themselves, recognized their stories, and felt that they sort of regained their dignity when they have seen that these professional theater artists who perform about their lives and about their struggles.
Excellent. And then now the more recent play, the Energy Vitalia.
In Romania, Energie Vitală.
I'm doing English, but see, this is what's great about Romania is I can understand things at least a bit much better than other countries.
The Latin background.
Yeah, the Latin background. It's great.
This here we. Okay, so I had this. I had a feeling that the crisis will get worse.
Okay, yeah, excellent.
Because
on that.
we started. Because I started the research about it more than 1 year ago. So it was before the war. It was, but of course, the prices were already rising, which is something we tend to forget today.
Yes.
But they were already on the rise, and. So I started, and I thought that I read a lot. I did a lot of research. I collaborated with professor of economics and of energy studies. So he's an engineer, but an economist as well.
Okay, excellent.
And who has quite I would say an informed. View towards the system, and I also did interviews with other and both engineers and economists.
Okay, excellent.
Because and many times the perspectives were not the same, of course.
Yes, of course not.
And also I collaborated with Adina Marincea, who is also who's a researcher herself, and she did research on the online research of the discussions in the online about the prices and who's capitalizing on it.
Okay, right.
And who is defending which perspective.
Okay.
And which was also very, very interesting. I will talk about what we have found out later. But so this was the research process, and then I realized that I don't want to. That if I would write the text myself, it will be a quite. Maybe I will talk too much only about economics and about energy, and I wanted to get also a more. Maybe a more humane perspective and a more emotional perspective. And so I talked to other three playwrights, Alice Monica Marinescu, Bogdan Georgescu, and Nicoleta Esinencu. Nicoleta is based in Chișinău, so in the Republic of Moldova.
Okay.
The other two are based in Bucharest. And I gave them the research material, and I asked them to write themselves their own perspectives. So basically the show is built on, and I wrote a text myself as well.
Yes.
So the show is based on 4 different texts written by 4 different playwrights, each with their own approach. And it's interesting that the texts are very different, and 2 of them are very documentary based.
Okay.
And they are really based on facts, let's say, and trying to understand the whole problem with the rise in energy prices. And but the other 2 are quite sci-fi. They are dystopias. So they are dystopias about, one is the dystopia about living in a society without electricity, or where access to electricity is scarce, and it's about a date. And how is a date between a young man and a young woman going on without
electricity,
without electricity, or with scarce electricity? And the other one is sort of in a farther future, let's say, in a future where both the electric energy, but also the vital energy, all rationalized by a system of robots that are controlling the quantity of energy that you spend.
Oh, really? So your and personal energy, your physical energy,
Yes,
plus
both,
the
plus the electric
outside.
energy.
The electric energy.
So there are these two dystopic perspectives, and then there are.
So yeah, we've talked about your plays, we talked about the market, the role that the EU plays, and I guess my big question for you is, what is the way out from this? And we talked about state intervention, but socially and I would say maybe through art as well. Why is art important and in this crisis, this energy crisis, and why is it important that there's a theater and a play, for example, or plays that engage with the topic of energy and society?
Mm-hmm. Well, regarding why is art important in the domain of energy, well, in my opinion, art is a means of, as Bertolt Brecht said, is a means of educating and entertaining at the same time. And all the studies in the last years show that people learn best when they have fun. And so when they enjoy what they are seeing or doing. So that's what we try to do. So I would say that the energy domain is very opaque, and it's very the people find it quite technical and don't think a lot about it. And through art or through theater, we can make it more we can make people understand it and also give a message. And our message was quite clear that we need public control of the energy system. That the energy system is something we all need, from the toilets to the internet. Nothing works without the energy. Without energy in the present day society. So we all need it. So then we should own it in one way or another. So maybe state control is not the best solution, but is the least bad solution that we have so far.
And then maybe a follow-up question, since things are still working, is what about renewables and, for example, energy communities? Do you think there's a place for that, or what's your view on that?
I have to admit that I am quite skeptical. So, of course, at the small level, they are great and they work fine, and the small communities that do it and become self-sufficient are great. But I am quite skeptical that with the technology we have today, we can run the whole system of 8 billion people through small communities of energy producers. And so what we would need is a huge investment in technology so that we can find renewable or sort of different renewable solutions on a planet level. But this can also be done only through state intervention, only through state funding of research.
Okay, and also maybe a philosophical change on the state, that consumers, the people, can choose their own technology and engage
exactly,
with it.
But this is also a sort of it's a philosophical shift, let's say. But I would say that the philosophical shift will come after the technological shift. First, we need the technology to do it, and then the ideas will follow in some way the technology. But what we lack so far is the resources to finance the research in this technological domain or technical domain.
Okay, excellent. All right, David, thank you so much for your time and your patience today. And I think we've recorded a really good episode, so thank you.
Thank you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, my apologies. Thank you for joining us for this episode. We produced the My Energy 2050 podcast to learn about cutting-edge research and the people building our clean energy system. If you enjoyed this episode or any episode, please share it. And remember, each episode is equivalent to consuming 10 journal articles, 1 book, and 500 charts on how to implement the energy transition. And you get it all in less, usually, than 60 minutes for each podcast. Guaranteed. I can actually say no other podcast makes this guarantee. The more we spread our message of the ease of an energy transition, the faster we can make the transition. You can follow us on LinkedIn, where we are most active, on the My Energy 2050 page, or on Twitter and Facebook. I'm your host, Michael LaBelle. Thank you for listening to this week's episode.